because it's not allowing me to do it.
Okay, that's fine. I think it started, something has started, so I don't know what it is, but never mind.
Great.
So, okay, I'll share the screen again. Okay, and I think I should put my video off for the time being when I'm talking. So that should be all right. Okay, can everybody see the shared screen now?
Yes.
Okay, no
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes. And please, everyone, if you can mute yourself and also preferably go put the videos off. That would be a good thing, because there should not be any bandwidth problems then. Okay, so in today's talk, I'm going to talk about the later part of the Indian coinage spectrum. And as the title says, it is looking at coins with how they help us to understand changing representations of sovereignty. As in from 18th century onwards, the political power of India passed on through various phases. There was originally a Mughal empire that was overruling the large part of the country. And it was gradually dismantled through various forces and various actions of various polities. But mainly at the other end of it, it was sort of gave way to the British, and that changed the political structure in India quite a lot over this period. So how do coins help us to understand what was going on, and in how is this change then reflected in the coinage is a very fascinating subject. So this is what we are going to look into in some detail, because as a historian, it is a very interesting subject, because topics such as sovereignty, legitimacy, the right to rule, the nature of Mughal fragmentation, the nature of colonization, these are very, very important topics that a lot of historians have worked with in the past. And my attempt is to just show how coins sort of fit into all that picture, because as usual, a lot of historians have not paid a great degree of attention to coins. Their main source of information in knowing about these processes has been documents, or a paper, or archives, or that sort of thing. So coins definitely add a certain interesting angle to these processes. So this is what we are going to see. So in this attempt, I'm going to treat coins as documents. Basically, historians work on paper and archives, but coins themselves can be read as documents can be read. And we can do this kind of study by using these coins, by studying and in understanding the designs and depictions that they have. So this is where my starting methodological point is about how to look at coins to answer these particular questions. Now, there are certain peculiarities about coins when coins are used in this fashion. The first peculiarity is that coins follow a design tradition. I mean, all coin collectors know that Mughal coins have a particular appearance. They look like something. They have a typical, typology. They have a typical sort of, inscriptions, whatever. So these are the traditions that have been ingrained in the numismatic aspect of the coins. So that makes them an interesting, fascinating object to actually read them. How to read them, because there's this kind of peculiarity about these coins. One of the major features of coins in this time, about 18th century onwards, as a lot of coin collectors would know, is that they carry symbols. And this is something very interesting. The role of the symbols is twofold. It allowed popular recognition on one hand. It told people how to recognize these coins. So therefore, we have mentions in the documents such as coins having particular names, which are sort of, which are given to them after these symbols. So for example, if a coin has the symbol of a sword on it, it will be called a Shamsheri rupee, or something like that. And the other reason why these symbols were added was to facilitate a kind of vehicle of princely identity. Whoever was issuing these coins put the symbols with a view that they could be recognized as their coin. It was not somebody else's coin, but this is my coin. This is a Gwalior coin. This is a whatever coin, Jhansi coin. This is a coin struck by this particular mint master, this particular daroga, this particular mint licensee, what was that. All these aspects are then reflected in the symbols. The inscriptions on the coins are many times reflections of the political status of the issuer. So you can see that there are various layers in the inscription. Sometimes the coins have the names of the Mughal emperors. Sometimes they have the name of the issuing person and the Mughal emperor. Sometimes they just have symbols. So there is a particular different kind of ways of registering this information in the legends of the coins. When it comes to the latter part, when coins actually start having pictorial depictions, which happens roughly from late 19th century onwards, we find that the portraiture on the coin is defined in ways to show the honor of the issuing authority and the royalty. Now, this honor is a very interesting concept, and this has been historicized by a lot of people. And this is the kind of concept that is many times regarded in India as with the word izzat. This is the honor of the person, and this is a peculiar concept. This is nothing to do with honor in general kind of honor, but this is an honor which is deeply rooted in tradition, deeply rooted in identity, deeply rooted in behavior. All these aspects are sort of come together in this concept of izzat as a kind of royal demeanor code, as it were. There were interesting appropriations on coins. For example, they can be seen as a reflection of their privilege and also their legitimacy. I'll show you examples of how this actually happens on coins. And also, there is a constant degree of consternation, of fight, friction. And when there is friction, there is also an element of appeasement. So how these two particular characteristics play out in the coin design and on the coins is, of course, also an interesting aspect of their study. So coming to the basic design feature of the coins, there was a symbol. And originally, we find that these symbols started as decorative aspects. And there are lots of Mughal coins where certain features stand out, and they are many times specific to certain mints. So for example, here is 4 examples of coins of Multan. And the top 2 coins are of Shah Jahan, and the lower 2 coins are of Aurangzeb. And on all these 4 coins, you can see that there is some sort of floral element. So on the top left, you can see that there is a feather-like thing, which is just here above the word Muhammad. And on the top right coin, deep down here in the corner, you see that there's kind of a flower-like thing. And the same flower-like thing, then you can see appearing on the gold coin here in the middle, and a similar sort of flowery thing, not exactly the same as that, but a flowery thing appears in silver coin on the bottom right here as well. So in general, there is a idea that flowery things act as symbols on the coins of Multan. And what one finds interesting is that there develops a repertoire of these symbols, and those symbols then keep on reappearing on these coins. This is a very interesting thing because some of these probably, in all probability, were connected with some sort of mint functioning. So it's possible that some of them were used by a particular mint master or a particular die cutter or something like that. We don't know. We can't be sure of that. But however, what is very important is that once they start appearing, they seem to have gained a kind of role of recognition, because not everyone would be able to read these inscriptions. And as coin collectors definitely know, there are lots of the times that you can't see the mint on this coin, so you don't know where this was struck, but the symbols are very much in the visible field when the coin is looked at. And somehow we find that these things are settled into a kind of a standard format. So for example, here are examples of Multan mint, of different kings. So there is, the top one is Aurangzeb, the bottom one, you know, so I'll go from sort of left, right, left, right, left, right. So left is Aurangzeb, right is Farrukh Sir, then left is Muhammad Shah, right is Ahmad Shah, then left is Ahmad Shah Abdali or Durrani, and then the last right one is a Sikh coin. But you see, all of these coins, although they are issued by different coin authorities, they are they have a similar kind of symbol. All of them have a very similar symbol appearing on them, and this is how the symbols then start getting codified, because you know that this is not just a Mughal symbol. This is a mint related symbol, and it appears on the coins of this mint irrespective of whoever has been the minting authority. So communicating through these symbols and telling people or telling the users what these symbols stand for, what are their kind of encoded messages in the symbol, is one way of showing that these coins belong in a particular order somewhere. This gives the coins a very interesting locative context. And gradually, this locative context has also been then translated into political context. So we see that the reason why these symbols then become very predominantly as identity parameters, as something that would recognize the coins, that you can recognize the coins from, is the very nature of the historical processes that were going on in this time. So in 18th century, the Mughal authority fragmented. It's a very well-known historical fact that the Mughal empire become weak, and all sorts of people started, appropriating power to themselves. And although they did that, notionally, the power actually remained still with the Mughal emperor. So the coins were still struck in the name of the Mughal emperor. And, these are 4 examples of coins all struck in the name of Shah Alam II, who had practically no power. Very famously it is said his name was Shah Alam, but his governance, his rule extended from Delhi to Palam. That was the classic metaphor, kind of saying that goes for his power. Shah Alam, of course, means the ruler of the world. But in a numismatic sense, he was it certainly was the ruler of India, even in that case, because, you have coins far away, like the Nawabs of Arcot, which is in Tamil Nadu, striking coins in the name of Shah Alam II, who's sitting way up in north in Delhi or Agra, for that matter. So the reason why all coins were being struck in the name of the Mughal emperor, therefore precipitated the reason that they should be also recognized. So in spite of the fact that they're all in the name of the Mughal emperor, there are different issuing authorities behind them, and that was then communicated through the symbols. So, for example, Maratha coin here has this famous symbol of the Maratha flag on it. Similarly, the British East India Company coin, which is at the bottom, has a little flower which was on the coins of Murshidabad, that was appropriated on the coins of Murshidabad from the previous rulers, the Nawabs of Bengal, and they sort of carried on with it. So these are the various symbols that one sees on the coins. And as I said, the reasons why the symbols appear are rooted in the historical processes that were affecting this time, and the need to actually tell people so that the people know whose coins these are, in spite of the fact that they are actually struck in the name of the same, or of the Mughal emperor, who had no real political power. A classic example of this is this episode, which happens in Ahmedabad, and you can see that the symbols change very interestingly with regard to the change in political authority. We see that the city of Ahmedabad was under the rule of the Marathas in the reign of of the Mughal Emperor Alamgir II. And just for 1 year and more, it was retaken back under the nominal Mughal control by Mumin Khan, who was the last governor of the princely Suba of Gujarat on behalf of the Mughals, and he was practically acting as independent Subedar in any way. But this is what happens. So in Regnalier 3 of Alamgir, which is the top left coin, you can see that the distinguishing mark on these coins is a mark of an Ankush, the elephant goad, which is very much connected with the Maratha identity of the coin. So this was put on the coins by the Marathas because it was one of the attributes in the hand of the Hindu god Ganesh. And because the Peshwas were very ardent worshippers or devotees of Ganesh, they put these kind of Ganesh-related symbols on their coins. So the Ankush appears on the coins of Ahmedabad as a symbol of the Peshwa's authority. What happens, interestingly, is when Mumin Khan takes over the control of the city, he very precociously kind of particularly replaces this mark. He takes that mark away, and you have the same coin. Everything else remains the same. Is Regnalier 3 of Alamgir II, but on the top right coin, you can see that the Ankush is being replaced by a flower. Now, this flower used to be the symbol of Ahmedabad Mint before the Mughals were ousted and the Marathas took over. The same feature continues for Regnalier 4, which you see the coin, which is bottom left. And you can see that it's still Alamgir, the second coin, Regnalier 4, and there is no Ankush, the flower still continues. But in this particular time, the Marathas were able to oust Mumin Khan and reoccupy the city. And they carry on by reintroducing the symbol of the Ankush. This interchange between the symbols clearly shows us that this, or the deployment and the replacement and redeployment of these symbols was definitely connected with political movements, and therefore the symbols were proving as a kind of an indicator of political identity of who is behind the issue of these coins. Now that is a very interesting thing, because that from here onwards, symbols become a very major feature of Indian coins all the way through into the 20th century, really. And when Indian coins were studied by early numismatists such as James Prinsep in early 19th century, even he was very acutely aware that the symbols played a particular role. And he was the first person to compile charts of these symbols as a means of attribution. So you open any standard catalog of princely state or late 18th or 19th century Indian coins, and there is always a chart. And the chart actually tells you that this is what is going on. These are the symbols, and these are therefore sort of diagnostic or attributable to these particular states. So this is how coins were studied earlier on, by recognizing that the symbols function in two ways. They serve the function of popular recognition, as well as they are the symbols standing for princely identity. So that is what the messages that are encoded in the symbols are. What comes next is a very interesting thing, because in the early 19th century onwards, you see emergence of certain new kingdoms. As the power of the company and the British extends, and as the Mughal Empire goes fading, we see that the political landscape and the political map of India changes considerably. A lot of these factions or splinters that were created with the fall of the Mughal Empire, and a lot of new regional assertions that were made, had a political presence that had to be ratified somehow. They could not be just brushed away. You know, they were there. They had been there for a few decades, if not centuries, and they had to be sort of accommodated somewhere in the political order. And the British made various ways in which they were accommodated. You know, they signed treaties on one hand, they gave them new statuses on one hand, and this sort of unleashed a process of recognition by the British into a new political order that's practically lasted all along the better part of the 19th century, up until about 1870s and 1880s. This process was going on of how the British reshaped and redefined the political map of India, and with a particular regard to the concept of sovereignty. This is a classic example of that, and this is a bronze figurine from our collection in the collection of National Museum. This was actually picked up in the junk market in London in the 1960s. And this shows the cavalcade of the king of Awadh, the Nawab of Awadh. And you can see that there are two elephants in this object. On one side, on one elephant, there is the king of Awadh and his minister. But on the other elephant, there are two British, which are very conspicuous by their wearing of British hats. So this was a kind of a joint statement or joint depiction of the importance, the political importance of both these factions. The king, the Mughal emperor in Delhi himself became a British pensioner, and one can see this in this really beautiful court scene, which is in the Victoria and Albert Museum's collection. And you see that this is Muhammad Akbar II, and amongst his courtiers that are standing with him while he sits on the throne is Charles Metcalfe, who is shown in the British costume. And in a very perverse kind of way, Charles Metcalfe was also responsible for curtailing the king's rights to issue his coins. The example of the coin that you see here in this slide was entirely a ceremonially issued coin. There was no currency value attached to these coins at all. As the Mughal emperor was emperor, even though he was just an emperor in his name, he had certain court rituals to be observed. So these coins were struck specially for the king so that he could observe these rituals. These coins were gifted to the king as in the ceremony of Nazar, to actually present him with coins struck in his own names. So he is kind of returned favor for allowing the person to see him. This was the particular ritual that was involved in this. So the coin that you see here was only struck in the mint at Delhi, only for allowing for such purposes. So the numismatic authority of the emperor itself was curtailed during this particular time. But the case of Awadh actually explains this even much better. In 1815, the British made the Nawab of Awadh, as he was called then, to declare his full independence, and he said that he was made into an independent king by the British. And so all that particular aspect, all these political changes were closely reflected in the coins of Awadh. Here is a classic example, a very unique object, the coronation medal of Ghaziuddin Haidar, who was then declared a king. But this is struck in gold, and this is the only known example in struck in gold, and it is currently in the collection of the British Museum. So these were the kind of objects that codified the change of the political spectrum. You can see here that the notion of kingship that Ghaziuddin Haidar wants to convey to us is a very Western notion of kingship. He is wearing a crown that looks kind of, it's a kind of hybrid crown, but it certainly has Western elements around it. It's like a coronet. It has got pointed ends at this. On the reverse, actually, you see a coat of arms, which was a Western invention. There was no tradition in India of having these kind of symbolisms that were associated with the royalty in this manner. So a particularly Western-looking, but still sort of steeped in Indian symbolism, coat of arms was a tradition that was invented by Ghaziuddin Haidar at this time. And you see the same things happening on his coins. The first coin here, top left, is a mohor struck still in the name of Shah Alam II. And actually, Shah Alam II had been dead at this time. His name is completely posthumous. But you can see that on the obverse, there is the coat of arms, the symbol of Ghaziuddin Haidar. And when he was declared a king, then he starts, of course, a king should start striking coins in his own name. And this is something which gets more complicated, as we shall see later on, that as a king, he had to strike coins in his own name. And this is what you see on the top right, that he started coins start being struck in his own names. There is a little bit of a difference here that the regnal year that this particular coin, although it is struck in his name, is counted from the appointment or his accession as a Nawab. So, the regnal year is 5. So it is counted because 5 years back, Ghaziuddin Haidar had succeeded to the throne at Awadh as a Nawab. So the regnal year is still 5. Then one step further is the coin which is on top, bottom left. There, the regnal year is changed to Ahad. So this is the first regnal year. And as a king, that is he's issuing the coin. So this regnal year is changed in the same year. So in one year, you have all these changes happening in a single year. And lastly, the last change that is made is that now Lucknow, the capital, is declared to be a Darus Sultanate, the seat of the kingdom, not the seat of. In the earlier coins, Lucknow was designated as Darul Amarat, the seat of the emirate. Now, it is not an emirate anymore. It has become a full-fledged kingdom. So the epithet of Lucknow as a capital of a kingdom changes on these last coins. So this is where the complete change, complete makeover from the coins of Ghaziuddin Haidar as a Nawab, acting on, nominally acting on behalf of the Mughal emperor, down to the coins of Ghaziuddin Haidar as an independent king, striking coins in his own names, occurs in this kind of within a 1 year or two. The coins kind of undergo these interesting changes. And this sort of feature is carried on by the succeeding kings of Awadh, who each of them have their own coats of arms. So then these coats of arms become a measure and reflection of the courtly identity of the Nawabs of Awadh. So each of these kings, there is Ghaziuddin Haidar that on top left, there is Muhammad Ali on top right, there is Amjad Ali on bottom left, and then there is Wajid Ali on bottom right. Each of these coins have the king's own names on the coins, as well as each of them have their own coat of arms. So this is very distinct feature that was adopted on the coins of Awadh. And this has direct connections with how the sovereignty of these kings were reflected onto their coinages. Although that was the case, this was not the case with everybody else in the country. There were lots of princely states at this time, particularly in mid-19th century, that still acknowledged the Mughal sovereignty. So it was not that like Awadh went its own way and started striking coins in his own in their own names. That was not the case for everyone. So we also have unique instances where the king, the Mughal king, nominal as his authority was praised in a kind of Sanskritic fashion. So this is a classic example of the rupee of Yashwantrao Holkar, which designates the king of Delhi as the Chakravarti, the universal king, and who is residing in the city of Delhi. In Sanskrit, he reads it as Indraprastha Sthito Raja. He's the king that is residing in Delhi. He's Chakravarti Bhumandali. So he's the Chakravarti, he's the universal ruler on the face of this earth. Tat prasadat kruta mudra. By his blessings, this coin has been struck. Lokesmain Vaivirajate, and it is ruling the population. So this is a kind of Sanskrit flavor that Yashwantrao Holkar decides to put on his coins. This is a unique instance. This is again a very interesting instance of how the overlordship of the Mughal emperor, albeit the fact that he was a Muslim ruler, is kind of translated into a Hindu Brahmanic kind of way by putting it this kind of Sanskritic and also epic usages. Indraprastha was a city that is known in Mahabharata. So this is where the inspiration of locating the Mughal emperor into a kind of Mahabharat-like landscape is coming from. This is a fascinating example of how the Mughal sovereignty was reflected into these coins by the use of appropriate coin inscriptions. The second coin that you see here is a classic example of a presentation rupee struck in Jaipur, and this is struck in the name of Muhammad Akbar. It's still, I mean, again, you know, Muhammad Akbar had no power whatsoever on Jaipur, but the fact that his coins were struck in his names. So there was a kind of differential treatment with regard to sovereignty when it came to the Mughal past, so far as these Maharajas were concerned. The takeover of the British of these princely states was not always, it was not always a matter of politics alone. They were also played into battles. So although coercion was one way of actually assimilating the princely powers into to bring them under British sovereignty, there was also conflict. And these three medals are good examples of those conflicts. This is the first medal on the left is of Bharatpur, and the campaign at Bharatpur was precipitated in 1825 by the British because the fort of Bharatpur was very close to Agra and Delhi, and the British thought that it was strategically not a good thing for the fort of the Maharaja of Bharatpur and the fort of Bharatpur to be completely out of their domination. So they took an opportunity in 1825 when there was a succession dispute in Bharatpur, and they attacked the fort of Bharatpur and basically subdued the king with the show of force. Similarly, the medal on extreme right, it reflects a battle of Multan that happened in the third and the last Anglo-Sikh war. And this was the battle that kind of sounded the death knell of the independent kingdom of Punjab, one of the last kingdoms in India to be taken over by the British through a political, a military exercise, not just a political exercise. And in the center is a star that was awarded in the Battle of Puniar. This was a typical case where the state that was subdued once then became belligerent. So this is a case where Gwalior, which was subdued in 1817, 1818, treaties were signed, everything was fine, hunky-dory, but then 20 years later, there were problems within the court at Gwalior, and that was then sort of taken as a kind of a reason for acting against the British interest. And the British again sort of went and defeated the forces of Gwalior in a battle in 1844, and this was a particular medal that was awarded. So the story of British assimilation of these princelings is not really all rosy, and it was not just a political maneuver, it was also a military maneuver at that end. And slowly and steadily, the impression of the British towards these Indian Maharajas also started changing. In the early part of the 19th century, the British thought that the Maharajas were a force to reckon with, and therefore they tried to deal with them in a political way by segregating them into different entities and then dealing with them one at a time, and therefore then slowly dismantling their domains and their kingdoms. Some of them, like Tipu, for example, were defeated militarily. The Marathas were defeated militarily, but some of them were, of course, then just brought into clever political ploys, such as the subordinate alliance scheme that was floated by Lord Wellesley at this time. In 1820s and 1830s, the attitude of the British became more and more expansionistic, and there were many reasons for this. One of the main reasons for this, why British wanted to consolidate their powers into India, was the fear of the Russians attacking through Afghanistan. So this was a kind of fear that the British felt all along in the late 1820s and early 1830s, and all the way up to 1840s as well. And one of the reasons that their way of dealing with the Indian Maharajas changed was this particular kind of much larger political picture that they were a part of, and they wanted to actually consolidate their holdings into, and they thought that the Maharajas might side with the Russians, and the Maharajas might play with the enemy in some sort, so they had to be sort of brought under some sort of control. And one of the ways that that was done was by Lord Dalhousie and his infamous doctrine of lapse. And this was a kind of instrument that the British played with to annex, to win over and to assimilate various Indian states. And you can see that there is a list that I copied from Wikipedia, really. And a lot of these states, if you see the dates in which they have been assimilated, have been under the tenure of Lord Dalhousie at this time. This created a certain amount of panic in the Indian rulers, and this was quite interesting because they thought that one of the ways that they could actually show their subservience, their friendliness, their friendship to the British was through striking coins in their name. And this was a very interesting change that was going to happen, because up till this time, the Maharajas were striking coins in their name and or the name of the Mughal emperor. They were not striking coins in the name of the British at all. But under this particular political pressure in 1840s, particularly, that the British, the local kings first started thinking of striking coins in the name of the British, so that they could numismatically denote their subservience or friendship to the British. And one of the first persons to do that was Maharaja Raghuraj Singh of Rewa. And this is again a very fascinating example of what happens when there is a particularly eager beaver looking towards cozying up to the British in a political sense. He mentioned to the political agent of Bundelkhand, whose name was William Alexander Bushby, that he wanted to strike coins in the name of the queen at that time, which was Queen Victoria. Alexander Bushby, being a typical bureaucrat, said, yes, you can do that, but we have to actually have an agreement from the Governor General in Calcutta. So this is typical bureaucracy. Oh, I can't answer you. I have to sort of refer it to higher ups, as it were, and seek their approval. So Maharaja says, yes, by all means, do whatever you want. And then Alexander Bushby sent the communique off to Calcutta. And again, typically for a government office at that time, the communication took a bit of a while to return a kind of a verdict, or should Maharaja Raghuraj Singh do this or should he not do this? Maharaja Raghuraj Singh was so eager that he ended up striking coins in the name of William Alexander Bushby himself. So these are unique coins in that respect, where the sovereignty of the Maharaja is being legitimized by a political agent, not even the full-fledged emperor. And here on this coin, you can see on the reverse, the words Agent Bushby Sahib are added into the design by Raghuraj Singh. So this is a classic example of how particularly excited were the Indian rulers with regard to Lord Dalhousie's policies of assimilating these princely states into British India. Second example is this unique 5 rupee coin, which was a ceremonial coin that was struck by Vijay Bahadur, the king of Datia, which was not, in the same part of Bundelkhand, but on the western side of Bundelkhand, whereas Rewa was on the eastern side of Bundelkhand. And here again, there are poetic inscriptions, and in the poetic inscriptions, the king refers to himself as Datia Dhipa, the king of Datia, Ravi Kula Tilaka, the font of the sign of the sun lineage. Ravi Kula is the sun's lineage. And then he says Bhupa Company Mitra. So he's actually alluding to the fact that he is a friend of the company. So this is a kind of subservient tone that one finds in these kind of coins. And this was entirely precipitated by the expansionistic activities that were happening at this time, late 1840s and early 1850s, by the activities of Lord Dalhousie, who was out and about to grab every piece of Indian princely states that he could get his hands on. And of course, we know that this actually led to a more radical response from the Indian people. And in 1857, we have the first great rebellion against all these colonial oppression that was going on. This is a small part of that story is also these coins that were being struck as to indicate subservience to the British. as a result of the great revolt of 1857 to 59, the authority of the Mughals finally ended, and the princes and the Maharajas finally realized that this was the end. There was not going to be any Mughal emperor after that. So again, they showed quite willingness to put the picture of the queen onto their coins. And at this time, there is no evidence that they actually asked for a permission. They just went ahead and did it. Some of these coins were actually struck while the revolt was going on. 1858 and 1859 are the two dates on these coins, and very much the revolt was going on in 1858, but still there was a need for the Maharajas to show their subservience to the British, and they actually put the pictures of the ruling British monarch onto their coins. Now, it is quite interesting at this place that to note that the inspirations for these images came from the postage stamps. And the postage stamps were introduced in India in 1854. These were the 3 issues of 1854. And quite interestingly, the pictures that are copied on the coins are not the pictures that one sees on the East India Company coins. Of course, there were East India Company coins which also showed Queen Victoria on them. And they were in circulation since 1840, as most coin collectors would know. But the representation of the Queen on those rupees of East India Company was without any royal attributes. So the Queen was shown bareheaded, and it had no particular, reflections of any royalty. Whereas the pictures on the stamps actually showed her with a crown. And that was very important for the princes and the Maharajas to note that they wanted a picture which actually showed the Queen as a queen. They did not wanted to show a queen as someone who's just looks like any other woman for that matter. So that's the reason why these pictures on the coins of Bharatpur, the unique instance, the first instance where the pictures of the reigning British monarch were adopted onto these coins, were copied, were inspired from the pictures on the postage stamps, only because the pictures on the postage stamps showed the Queen with a crown. That was very significant aspect. This kind of liking for particular aspects, particular emblems and features of sovereignty was taken up by the very smart British. And this is something that was discussed in 1970s by the historian Burton Stein, by the historian Bernard Cohn, and he referred to it as inventing of a tradition. Now, it's a very paradoxical word. When people talk about tradition, people think that it is very old. However, certain traditions are not that old. They just are assembled through little parts and bits and pieces of the existing traditions and then actually creating a tradition. This is a really remarkable picture of Lord Lytton, who was one of the most imperialistic viceroys of India to rule in 1870s. And he had this bright idea of actually declaring the Queen of England or the monarch of England as the Emperor of India. So this was actually replacing the British monarch replacing the Mughal Emperor of India with the British monarch. So it was like changing of sides. And he has this very important, very interesting piece that he writes to his daughter, and it says, the further east you go, the more importance becomes of a bit of bunting. So, the embellishments that one can create, the kind of roles that one can create, the traditions one can invent, so that the sovereign aspirations of these princelings are accommodated, becomes very important. And he was the first person to actually notice that. And as a result of that, he assembled this great Delhi Darbar of 1877, and he actually formulated a completely different political order with regard to sovereignty, which is about this. Awarding of particular statuses. So he created orders. So the most eminent order of the Indian Empire was founded. These were orders of chivalry. The most exalted order of Star of India that was founded in 1861 was extended at this time. The Kaisar-e-Hind medals were awarded. And most importantly, the rulers of princely states were given coats of arms. And this was done by a body, a proper official body that was established in Calcutta, and that was called a Royal College of Arms that was established in Calcutta, which were involved in evolving these kind of designs for coats of arms. Also, a hierarchy of gun salutes were created. Now, the states were sort of hierarchized, with some having 21 gun salutes. So whenever the Maharajas of these states visited any prominent imperial authorities, then they were given these gun salutes. So there was 21, 17, 15, 12, 8, and then there was a whole lot of states which had no gun salutes whatsoever. But there was this kind of hierarchy. So Lord Lytton very cleverly seems to have tapped into this whole liking that the Indian Maharajas had for hierarchies, for ceremonies, for traditions, and they sort of invented this particular fashion. This was again invented completely under the British so, British Raj, really, in a way. Some of these coats of arms that were given to the states then start making appearance on coins. And just two examples. One is a gold mohor of Rewa, which we see the coat of arms are appearing on the coins, and a lot of them have interesting mottos. So here the motto of Rewa state is "Don't try to fight with tigers," and that is inscribed under these two tigers, which are holding the banner. And in Sanskrit, it reads "Mrugendra prati dvandva tamma prayat." Don't try to mess around with tigers. The example on the right is the coat of arms of Indore state, and the motto there is "Prahomesho labdhya shri kartuh pararabdhat," and says Umesha says success comes to one who tries hard for it. So this is the motto of Indore state. So these were inventions that were made by the British, but they had elements of tradition in it that extended from way beyond. For example, in the coats of arms of Indore, you see a horse, and you see a Nandi, and you see a sun, and you see a lance. These all are the emblems that are associated either with the lineage or with the titular deity, or or something to do with the family gods of the Holkars. So these are emblems which are steeped into tradition. However, they have been sort of put together in this interesting Western fashion by a British intervention, and that's what makes them quite interesting. And the fact that they come on coins is an interesting insight into how their sovereignty was depicted. There's these kind of age-old, sort of, almost timeless factors. So, for example, the sun and the lance and the horse are all depictions of Malhari or Khandoba of Jezuri, which was the family deity of the Holkars. Now, this is a much older thing than the British Raj or colonialism, but it has been brought into context by the British into creating this particular symbol of sovereignty that then subsequently is adopted on their coins. So how do the princes then negotiate these relationships is a very interesting aspect. And then you can see that reflected in coins as well. For a lot of princely states, the relationship between imperial power and the response that the princes gave was a direct acknowledgement of the imperial power. So coins were struck bearing the name of both the monarchs. So we have an example of the rupee of Bundi, which is struck in the name of Ram Singh, who was the local Maharaja, but also in the name of Queen Victoria. And this also led to this very interesting phenomenon that you have coins struck in the name of very ephemeral kings whose coins do not actually exist even in their own parent country. So, for example, Edward VIII, who ruled just less than a year in 1936, has no coins. His own coins were not issued in Britain, but in India, his coins were issued, coins in his name were issued by Kutch, which you see an example here, where on one side is the name of the ruling king of Kutch, King Arji III, and on the other side it is the name of Edward VIII written in Farsi. This is interesting because from an Indian viewpoint, there was no need for an official coronation as such. The fact that his George V had died had meant the kingship had automatically passed on to Edward VIII, and therefore he was king in the Indian viewpoint, even though he had not had an official coronation as such at that point. So this is a very classic example of how the princely response was a far more quick and to the point than the imperial response as well when it comes to coins. That coins were issued in direct acknowledgement of the paramount or imperial power. The second way was to have this acknowledgement in a sort of indirect sense. So we have the inscription Dost-e-London or Friend of London on this coin of Udaipur, and also we have a similar acknowledgement of Shah of London, Shah London, and Dost-e-London. These are both examples of an indirect acknowledgement. This coin, the Shah of London, was actually struck when there was a queen on the British throne. There was not a king, but even though there was a queen, she is still being reflected as or referred to as a king by her masculine gender, means that the concept of the usage of the word is more abstract. It does not refer to a person, but it refers to an institution as such. So therefore it becomes a sort of an indirect acknowledgement of the imperial power. And thirdly, there was no reason, and the kings, and the third example was the kings started issuing coins with absolutely no acknowledgement of the princely power at all, of the imperial power at all. They carried on issuing coins in their name only. There was no mention of any other imperial power as such. What is also interesting is that the symbolism that we saw in the earlier part of the talk, that the reason why these symbols were adopted, and the gradual shift that the symbols sort of made into an instrument of sovereign identity, then carried on. It just carried on all across the time. There is a coin of Indore issued in 1782, and there is another coin issued in much later in 1889. So over 100 years of time, the symbol of the sun still appears. Coins of Indore. The coins of Jaipur are even more interesting. This is a Nazrana rupee that was issued in 1800, and you have this symbol of the jhad on it, the branch of a tree, and you see the same branch appearing as a kind of symbol of Jaipur also in 1944. So over nearly 150 years, the symbols then therefore endured as a kind of instrument of sovereign identity. And this is a very interesting feature of representing sovereignty that you see on Indian coins. The right to rule and the right to legitimize the rule was also reflected on coins in very interesting manners. Now, we all know that these, by and large, most princely states were creation of the British. They were made to sort of function as British vassals. In a way, they were subordinate to the British imperial power, although they had lots of local rights and privileges. But they were, they carried on. Technically, they were still subordinate to the British power. However, they display a very acute sense of where does their sovereignty come from onto their coins. So this example of the gold mohor of Janjira actually is struck in the name of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. And that is because the original title of the original political importance of the Siddhis of Janjira was actually granted to them by Aurangzeb. So even in 1868, when they actually struck these coins, they struck them in the name of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, even though he was dead for about 300 years by that time. And that actually shows their sense of where they had this kind of historical sense of where their particular right to rule originated from. Similarly, on the medal of a coronation medal that was issued by Chhatrapati Shahaji II of Kolhapur, the date that is made, Rajashak 274, that is what you see written on as the date, Jeshta Shuddha Tera Rajashak 274. this Rajashak is actually counted from the coronation of Chhatrapati Shivaji. So there, the kind of origins of their sovereign rights are very, very clear to these rulers, and they subsequently deployed them very astutely on coins and medals that they struck. This is a very interesting aspect again. In the late 19th century, particularly after the jubilees of Queen Victoria, both the Golden Jubilee in 1887 and the Diamond Jubilee in 1897, celebrated with great pomp and circumstance, that actually spurred on a lot of local rulers to celebrate their own jubilees. And these are, again, a celebration of jubilees was seen as kind of an example of how the sovereignty of that particular ruler was reflected, and special coins were struck for these ceremonial issues. The coin on top left is from the collection of Jan Lingen, and that is the first coin in India which actually has the word Jubilee written on it. It's also, although it is written in Persian, it is the word Jubilee is actually inscribed, and that is the coin of Kishangarh. And quite interestingly, it is struck in 1900, which is not actually a jubilee of the Queen, but the jubilee of the 60th birthday of the ruling king. So this was the kind of, the concept of jubilee is also being sort of Indianized in a very interesting manner here. The coin on top right is a golden jubilee issue of Ganga Singh Ji of Bikaner, and similarly the coin at the bottom is a golden jubilee issue of Maharaja Ranbir Singh of Jind in the Punjab. So these were all ceremonial issues struck specifically for these occasions. The identity of the ruler, as as a kind of marker of their sovereignty, was also depicted in the coin designs. The attire and the portraiture of Maharaja Yashwantrao Holkar II on the copper coin is very Maratha. You can see that the headgear, his attire, everything, that's all very much steeped into a Maratha way. Interestingly, the coin of Bahawalpur, actually, on the other hand, his attire and the design of the coin is very much steeped into a Turkish fashion, because in early 20th century, the head of the Khalifa of Islam was the Sultan of Turkey. And even though he was deposed in 1922, Turkish costumes and mannerisms became very much a norm of adopting a particularly Islamic identity in the early 20th century in India. And here you see examples of that. There is Sadiq Muhammad Khan V, who is wearing a Turkish face cap on his coins, but also on the reverse, the tamga, the royal cipher that is in the center of the coin design, is actually modeled on the tamga or the ciphers of the Ottoman sultans. This is a very Turkish design that one encounters on these coins. So the concept of sovereignty sort of embedded in the identity of the rulers is also reflected on the coins at this time. A very interesting dynamic that evolved was between subordination and subversion at this time. And this was a kind of dynamics of relationship that existed between princely states and the paramount power or the imperial power. And at the very heart of this dynamic, there was the right to coinage was a bone of contention. What the princes and the Maharajas were trying to tell the British is that since we are Maharajas or Nawabs or whoever, we must have the right to strike coins in our name. And this was not really music to the British ears, because ideologically, they were not really happy with the whole prospect of these local kings having their own coins, because in a way they were actually sort of going against the imperial ideology in that respect. But also economically, it was not proper, not the right way. The aim of the British was to create a uniform coinage all across the Indian subcontinent, and to have all these separate coinages by the states was going to be a major player about this. So the British tried to stop these rulers from striking coins in many ways, as much as they can. And there is a whole lot of papers that one can consult in the foreign department's correspondence in the National Archives of India in New Delhi that talks about these particular dynamics, how they were evolving, why the British were not really happy with these Maharajas having their own coins. As a way of subverting this, the Maharajas then decided to actually strike ceremonial coinage. And this was, in a way to show that, well, we are king, we can have our coins. At the same way, they did not actually require a permission to do this, because to the British, these were only used in ceremonies. So this was a kind of, the usage was very much a kind of curtailed usage in a way. And these coins were just kept confined to particular aspects, particular court functionings or particular ceremonies in that way. So unique, interesting feature of these coins is that these coins have almost invariably have no denomination mentioned on them. Their value is only to be adjudged by their metal and their weight, and therefore there is never any denomination mentioned on them. Technically, these are not coins. It's a very interesting numismatic question whether they are coins or not. But of course, because they're rare and because numismatists think that they are sort of, presentation on Nazarana coins, as it were, they do command a lot of market, and they are quite in big demands for that. Technically, however, it remains to be seen whether they are actually coins, that one can actually call them coins or not, because they are used, they were struck only for a very specific purpose and in very specific numbers in a way. But this was a right, again, that was bound by the concept of izzat. Why were these Maharajas doing this? Was to show that they had a particular kind of honor, and this was a very Indian concept, that they had to do this, and all the essence of this concept as honor can be seen in a lot of these coin designs. So from a study perspective and from the viewpoint of looking at legitimacy to the kingship of these Maharajas, the coins become very important documents to see and study, because they are kind of, interestingly, sort of embedded into these wider concepts of izzat and decorum in a funny way. A few examples of these ceremonial or medallic issues: that is a coin of Jhalawad that was issued for marriage, a coin of Cochin that was issued for the Maharaja's 65th birthday, a coin of Deva Senior that was issued again for a coronation, and a tiny state or even a zamindari of baronage that was in Goa called Penne, struck these little medallets worth actually 2 rupees each for the thread ceremony of their the estate holder's son, and they were struck only for these particular reasons. So these are coins per se, but they sit on a fence in terms of where exactly numismatically they should be, whether they should be treated as coins or not is a good question. However, from an anthropological point of view, from a historical point of view, they are absolutely important objects, because they have all the makings of the questions, the issues that we have been talking about: identity, recognition, legitimacy, kingship. All these things are actually involved in making of these coins. As a last slide, I would say this was not the same thing. Loyalties were not something set in stone. Loyalties changed as times changed. And of course, these are the famous examples of the coins of Kutch, which omitted, after independence, omitted the name of the British emperor from them. And instead of them, they put this nationalistic slogan "Jai Hind" onto their coins. So this is the classic sort of gasp, the last gasp of the story of sovereignty seen through coins, is the sovereignty which is reflected without the imperial aspect attached to it. There was no more an empire. They were not part of an empire. They were part of an Indian union as such, and therefore they declared their loyalty to the Indian Union by incorporating the slogan "Jai Hind" on these very last issues of princely India. So to conclude, I would say that coins, as we can see, can be used as a medium to illustrate what sovereignty meant and how it was reflected and how the changes happened. The whole story is set within the concepts of traditional notions on one hand and imperial negotiations of those notions on the other hand. We can, we could see from various examples that how these were, how the traditional notions were negotiated by the imperial authorities. Of course, there were consternations, there were fights, and there were compromises. So these two aspects make the story even more interesting. Sovereignty here is a kind of functioning sovereignty. It's not absolute sovereignty, because of course these coins were originally issued as subordinate to the Mughal sovereignty, then subsequently issued as subordinate to the imperial British sovereignty. So when you talk about sovereignty as a kind of functioning sovereignty, what are the aspect that's actually constitute these? So there's new norms, notions, and nomenclatures all come into play, and all of them then sort of contribute to what is called inventing the tradition. This is a very interesting aspect that historians have talked about. Although tradition to a lay observer seems sort of time immemorial and steeped in great ancient past, often it is not. It is something that has been invented just to serve for particular purposes, and this is the thing. As we saw, the right to coinage was a major obstacle in this story. The fact that the very act of issuing coinage was seen by the paramount power as something which is not desirable made a very interesting twists and turns into these stories. In balancing the subordination, in one way to say that we are subordinate, however, we are also have these kind of unique identities and traditions. The concept of honor or izzat is very important, and this actually sort of acted as a balance between the subordination on one hand and the expression of sovereignty in the other hand. So the responses to this particular dynamic between subordination and subversion, as we saw, was issue of ceremonial or medallic coins, which was a kind of unique thing that happened between the two. And finally, we have the nationalist twist, when the integration of India with the disappearance of the sovereign power, we have the acknowledgement of the Indian Union on these coins as well. So there is this fascinating journey of over 200 years that one can see through coins of how the various shades of sovereignty were seen, were described, were typified, were depicted, and were changed as we go along through the period of about roughly about 200 years. So that in my talk, and I'm going to stop the screen share, start the video, and I will ask Malcolm to look at the questions, and we'll take it forward from that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shailendra. As usual, it was a very interesting and it was a very nice talk. So thanks a lot. I was gobsmacked with the Ghaziuddin Haider gold medallion. I never knew of this existed.
Well, the idea was to show. I mean, the idea was that because I knew that people would like to see it.
Yes, and yeah, and even the paintings and the photographs. So all in all, it was very nice. Thank you very much. There are quite a few comments and questions. So I'll first start with the questions.
Right.
I've seen one.
I'm scrolling down as well.
Jain. Okay, so I'll start with Mohit Jain. I think that's at 8:36 p.m. So the question is, could you help with the understanding of Stephen's cross across Mughal, Sikh, and IPS coins? Was it to appease the British, which I presume?
No, my answer to that is that it is just a generic symbol. Not every time that a Stephen's cross-like symbol appears on coins, it has to absolutely have to do with something with a colonial connection. It is in some cases it is, and people generally like to extrapolate that logic into making other pieces with the similar symbols equally important as the ones that actually has it. But the real story is that not every coin with the Saint Stephen symbol has to do, has a connection with the colonial connection at all. So, and in some coins, it is just a decorative symbol that that just comes, as a design context. There's nothing to do with the colonial powers.
Okay. The second question is why they follow Persian and Urdu legend on coin during British ruling instead of English?
Well, it was basically, there are two reasons for this. One was that for a lot of, for bulk of the country, the language Hindustani was written in Devanagari as well as Persian script. So even though the script is barely Persian, there were usages it was kind of a lingua franca at that time. It was a common language. And the other reason is that there is, of course, the coinage tradition that I talked about at the very the beginning. The coins have a particular tradition, and that tradition cannot be easily broken. It was, of course, broken later on in mid 20th century, mid 19th century onwards. But that is the reason why Persian and, well, not Urdu, but Persian legends predominate over these coins.
Okay. There's another question. The Nawabs of Arcot and the Marathas issued coins in the name of Mughal emperors, even though they wielded significant power. Why was that done? Is it to conform to a same weight and designed to facilitate trade, etc.? I think that was answered in the beginning, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I mean, it's the same answer, because there was a tradition of having coins in the name of Mughal emperors, which was not easily broken. And also, legitimately, the font of all sovereignty rested in the Mughal emperors anyway. The emperors were seen as some sort of superior figure from whom all the legitimacy flowed downwards. So even though they had coins in the name, they had wielded significant political power, the notional power, the ideological power still rested in the name of the Mughal emperor.
Okay, I think there's a follow-on question from the same person, or is it the idea of one country, Bharat, was taking shape during that time and coinage was a precursor to this idea?
No, I mean, there was no much of a, I mean, the idea of one country is a kind of a late 19th century phenomenon that comes sort of between 1860 and 1880, really. So that's not really the reason about that.
Okay. Then Amit Mehta asks, there was a mention about the ceremonial coins not having a value. However, even earlier, most coins in India did not show any value. It appears to be a continuation of the earlier tradition. Any comments?
Yes and no, but the thing is that when most of these coins were being issued, the fact that coins carried a value had become commonplace. So even though there was a tradition that ceremonial coins, when most coins did not have a value, that was essentially rested in the concept of those coins being actually worth their metal. Whereas the weights and the kind of usages that these coins have, I mean, most of these coins are post 1875, when the concept of actually having a value written on the coin was very much in vogue. So if at all they were doing this, they were actually going against that particular norm that was already in circulation. And one of the ways that they wanted to do this was to show that these coins are not for circulation. So that is why they are issued in the sort of earlier tradition of not having a value. They are issued in a milieu, in the surroundings of coins having a value. So the tradition of not having a value was already broken while these coins were being issued.
Okay.
All right.
Next question is, how do you ascribe the Pedne medallion as a coin?
Well, this is the question that I posed. I mean, technically speaking, none of these are coins per se. The reason why the Pedne medallion was a coin is because and a contemporary reference to the actual episode where this particular gentleman who was ruling Pedney at that time struck these. The reference says that he struck a coin worth 2 rupees as a gift to the priests. So, I mean, in Marathi it says "Tyani 2 रुपया किमतीचे नाणे पाडले होते." Now it can be construed differently. I mean, it's not it's again like these kind of it's a very gray area whether these are really coins or they're really not coins, because for in sort of colloquial parlance one would call them coins. There is no doubt about that. But in a kind of strict numismatic sense, they were not part of a currency. They were not, so they are, and they're not even medallions per se, because medallion is a very Western concept that was evolved in 12th, 13th, 14th centuries as something which was a metallic piece to commemorate something.
Right.
These were not purely for commemoration. These also had a functional use.
Okay.
So again, even at that level, they are not really, they're in a very gray area.
Okay, but I mean, in those days, any bullion would hold its value in, would have some monetary value assigned to it. So
yes, I mean,
wouldn't just
obviously
be...
there would be, because a lot of these coins are struck to some standard, which is monetary standard.
Exactly.
Like some of them are struck to equivalent to sovereigns or guineas. Some of them have like, equivalents of a tola. So they are struck to some sort of monetary standard. Some are not. I mean, the Devas coins are not struck to any monetary standard. They are just sort of, vague kind of thing. So it's again like, I think what decides their use as a coin is the functionality of it. Prashant wants to say something. Could you unmute him?
Yeah. Prashant, you can unmute yourself, but yeah, I've
unmuted you.
Yeah.
Oh, just wanted to say hi. It was a great talk.
Sure.
Yeah. And what do you rate the Awadh medallions as? Are they numismatically 7 tola weight or not?
No, I think they are medallions. Because they are commemorating an occasion. They were struck to commemorate the coronation. They are not. So they are, if at all you want to make a distinction, they are the real medals. I would call them medals rather than coins. But I mean, 7 tola is a very odd weight. I mean, it's not. It doesn't really prescribe. And the gold coin is even more than that. It's not 7 tolas. The gold medal is, I think, 190 grams.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the next question is from Bastiji. Boss, did you see any coin written Nazrana?
No.
Sorry, did you see any coin written? None.
No, there is no Nazrana ever written on a coin. Nazrana is a very interesting term. I've been trying to find out what exactly, who exactly used it for the first time. And all the indications are suggesting that the term Nazrana was actually never a historical term. It's a colloquial numismatic collector's term. And sorry?
No, sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. What I've heard, and this could probably just be a rumor, is that when the original South Asia book was written, some of the writers actually came up with this.
No, even before that, the word Nazar coins has been in early late 18th century publications. Like William Webb's coins of Rajputana mentions Nazar coins. But Nazar is something different and Nazrana is something different. So Nazar was a ritual. Nazrana actually is an object adjective. So they mention Nazar coins, but nobody mentions Nazrana as such. I mean, I think somebody, I think it was, I don't remember whether it was Steve Album or somebody else told me that the word was first used by Charles Spanish. And Charles Spanish was the numismatist at the American Numismatic Society. And he sort of put that word into currency, as it were. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Moving on, next question is, has anyone read the Tugras on copper coins of Hyderabad properly in any publication?
Yes, they are basically, it just says Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah with the initial in the outer part. So.
And the follow-up question is, were the coins generally made of copper, silver, and gold, or are any other metal or alloy-based coins minted?
No, most of these are copper, silver, or gold. There are, there are occasional instances of gold coins, silver coins, which are been coated with gold, but not apart from that.
Okay.
Right.
Anybody else has a question? They can unmute themselves and ask if they like.
Anyone around? No, I think everybody's gone very quiet.
Okay, then in that case, I'll request somebody from the Mumbai Coin Society to give a vote of thanks. Thank you, Shailendra.
Who is this somebody from Indian Coin Society?
That should be me, I think.
Who is we? Where is? Oh, you! Oh my goodness!
No, so the reason there wouldn't be many questions is that I think you do such a great job of explaining that I think there isn't much room for question to that. So that is why. So it's very, very nice to see you. And on behalf of Mumbai Coin Society and numismatist aficionados all across the country, I'm very, very grateful on behalf of Mumbai Coin Society that you're doing this series of talks with us. And thank you so very much. It was a it was a fantastic experience for us. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Indeed a pleasure. I might announce that the next talk will be entitled Linking the Past. And there I'm going to talk about ancient India and how particularly counter-struck coins help us to create a chronological landscape.
That will be a very interesting subject to attend.
Yes.
So we look forward to
that will be same time, and I would request Malcolm to make the poster ready tomorrow or day after so that we can advertise it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
All right.
Shailendra,
Yes.
before you exit, there are quite a few comments for you in the chat box. So everybody's been very impressed with
okay.
you.
No problem.
So, yeah,
I'll browse through the chat box. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye. Play safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You too. Be well. Bye.
Thanks.